I saw a clip recently of Danny Cannell, notable Florida State guy, ripping on ESPN's FPI for fading the ACC and bolstering the SEC. And you know what? He's 100% right. That Clemson and Miami got moved down and teams like Ole Miss and Tennessee got moved up when nothing substantive happened over the summer. I don't understand it. Doesn't make any sense to me. What changes are you actually seeing there? ESPN's Football Power Index. It gives a lot of fodder to the conspiracy theory folks, and I don't think it's that conspiratorial to think that ESPN wants the SEC to succeed more than other conferences. With that being said, Mr. Cannell, who I've met before, good guy. We've done some shows together in the past. I am not going to give your Seminoles any level of respect because last year they weren't just the worst preseason top 10 team literally in the history of college football. They have, to some extent, doubled down on the same approach. Now, I heard Joel Klatt talking about this. I don't know that Florida State has ignored high school recruiting the way he kind of portrayed, but Brian Smith of Locked On Seminoles will tell you they don't do as good of a job as they should. They've pulled in a couple of top 20 classes. They should be able to do a little bit better than that. But when I look at their schedule for the year, certainly, I don't think they're as bad as last year. I try to be as consistent as I can on this show. Plenty of you hold me to that standard. I'm here for it. I'm here for it. Send me all the nasty comments you want if you feel like I'm being unfair or ridiculous or absurd. That's fine. I'll ponder whether I think you have a valid point. Sometimes people do. Most of the times you don't. I think it's fun anyway. So I look at Florida State's schedule and say, okay, they should be a better team. It's a low bar. Their only win last year was against Cal, who we'll talk about later on the show. It's such a Cal thing to lose to Florida State last year. The Seminoles were atrociously bad. But you know what? They went out and attacked their weaknesses, which was everything. They hired a defensive staff from Florida or from Nebraska. Yeah, it was a really, really, really good move. They went and hired Gus Malzahn, who I think is still pretty good. And, you know, Scott Frost could succeed at UCF again. I don't think he's going to be successful this year. But I never thought Gus Malzahn was a bum. I never thought he was incompetent. Maybe it was time to move on from the UCF gig. But he's now the OC. They bring in Thomas Castellanos, I don't know. You know who I'm talking about. The Boston College transfer. It's not a bad move. As a bridge quarterback, when you're trying to reestablish a certain floor of success, Castellanos and Malzahn have a history, and you know, familiarity is always a good thing for a quarterback to have when he's going to a new team. Florida State went heavy in the portal again, which is how they got into trouble last year. Now, that's not to say that going out and adding a bunch of transfers can't work. We saw it work for Indiana. We've seen it work for Colorado the last couple of seasons. The only reason I'm going to pick Florida State to win as many games as I am about to, their schedule is incredibly favorable. And I do think their coordinators are way better than last year, and I think they are better at quarterback. But what I see when Vegas and our friends at FanDuel put out a preseason win total of 7.5 for Florida State is giving them a level of respect they do not deserve. There is not another team, aside from maybe Clemson, potentially Miami, the big brands essentially, where you pay attention to brand power more than the actual team, that would get this level of respect because of one offseason. Florida State had a top 10 transfer portal class going into last year. And off a 13-0 season, that's why they were some people's pick to win the ACC. It was a complete and total disaster. Just because they're going to be better than the worst Florida State team and one of the worst Power 4 teams I've seen in recent memory. I mean, it's up there with some of the Kansas teams of the past. 2022 Colorado was atrocious. I just keep going down the list. There have been some horrifically awful ones. Florida State is up there. They're way up there, or down there, I should say. To give them the respect of 7.5 being the win, I am not in that camp. I have them power rated way lower than most people. in my preseason ACC power rankings. You can see those here on YouTube. I have Florida State at 14. Now, your record is not necessarily indicative of where I think you're going to fall. That's not what this is. This is who I think the best teams are in the ACC. However, Florida State has got a schedule that's pretty favorable. And by the way, the teams that are below them, North Carolina, in my rankings, North Carolina, Wake Forest, and Stanford, 2 of those 3 are on Florida State's schedule this year. That's pretty good. So they start with Alabama. Jam Miller's not going to play in that game for the Crimson Tide. I don't love that. I'm not super worried about it, even though the game is in Tallahassee, and I think the crowd should be on fire trying to jumpstart what would be a spectacularly huge upset. I mean, Kalen DeBoer's seat would heat up considerably if he loses that game. I don't think there's any way he does. Florida State's not going to beat Alabama this year. 13.5-point underdogs for a reason. It's just a number on paper. I'll give you that, Seminole fans. Alabama's going to walk into your home stadium and win that game. Then it'll be 3 straight wins. East Texas A&M, Kent State, and Virginia. I wouldn't sleep on Virginia. Virginia's, that game being at home. All right, I'll give Florida State the edge there. Miami at home. Nope, Miami's a much better roster and a better team. That's going to be Miami. Pitt at home. I again am taking the Panthers here. To beat Florida State on their home field, I think that Florida State fans, once again, are going to have to get used to seeing their team lose on their home turf. Pitt lost 6 straight games to end last year. They won their first 7. Eli Holstein's back at quarterback. Pat Narduzzi is more... That should be his nickname. I'm sure somebody's come up with that. Pitt Narduzzi. Pat Narduzzi is more than a respectable coach. They were a better team last year. I don't think Florida State has just suddenly flown past them, and Pitt has no ability whatsoever. Pitt returns over 60% of their production from last year. Sort out what happened in the second half of the season, play more like the first half, and yeah, you can go beat Florida State. Then they go at Stanford, who are going to be starting Oregon State legend Ben Gulbranson. I'll mention Oregon State later on today's show as well. I think Florida State can win that. I think they'll beat Wake Forest at home. That's a first-year head coach with Jake Dicker. And by the way, those 3 games, I think Florida State will lose at least one. I'm taking Pitt. None of them would shock me. I wouldn't be surprised if that's a landmark win of sorts for Jake Dickert in his first year, or if Stanford does weird things on the farm. They've done that many times over the years. But after the Wake Forest game, it starts to get tough for the Seminoles. The first half, though, boy, first 2/3 really, it's pretty favorable. At Clemson, that's a loss. Virginia Tech, that's a better team. At NC State, I have them power rated just ahead of Florida State. And so when that game is being played on NC State's home field, yeah, going to take them to win. At Florida, I was talking about them earlier, that's a better team. So 5-7, step forward. Mike Norvell saves his job, go into the offseason looking to improve and get back to being a top team in the ACC. I just cannot see how they or anyone should get the level of respect that they're getting here. I mean, 7.5, that win total indicates you are a borderline ACC title contender. Ridiculous. For Florida State, for North Carolina, I'm taking both of those unders in the ACC.